If you're Canadian thinking about retiring somewhere warmer, moving abroad to be closer to family, or just spending your winters outside the country, there is one financial detail that could catch you completely off guard, and it involves the very pension income you've spent your entire working life earning. Stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll know exactly what happens to your CPP and your OAS the moment you leave Canada, and what you need to set up before you go. Hey everyone, welcome back to Frank Canada Today, the channel where we break down the real financial details that actually affect your life, without the confusing government jargon. Today we're tackling a question I get asked constantly. What really happens to your Canada pension plan and your old age security if you decide to leave the country? Whether that's for 6 months, a year, or permanently. Let's get into it. Let's start with the pension that causes the least confusion, and that's CPP. The Canada Pension Plan is based entirely on the contributions you made during your working years here in Canada. And here's the good news. It is not tied to where you currently live at all. If you contributed to CPP while you were working, that entitlement is yours, and it follows you almost anywhere in the world. There is no residency requirement to keep receiving it, no time limit on how long you can be outside Canada, and no requirement to periodically return. Once you're eligible, your CPP payments can continue indefinitely, whether you're living in Portugal, Mexico, Thailand, or anywhere else on the planet. The one thing that does stop is your ability to keep contributing to CPP itself once you're no longer working in Canada, unless you're continuing self-employment income here. But the pension you've already earned is essentially locked in and portable. Now, old age security is where things get considerably more complicated, and this is the part that trips up a lot of people. OAS is not based on your contributions at all. It's based on how many years you lived in Canada after the age of 18. If you've lived in Canada for at least 20 years as an adult, your OAS becomes fully portable, meaning you can receive it indefinitely from anywhere in the world, with no time limit and no requirement to return. This is actually the most common scenario for Canadian retirees moving abroad, because if you've spent most of your adult life here, you very likely clear that 20-year threshold without even realizing it. But if you have not met that 20-year residency requirement, the rules shift dramatically. In that case, OAS is only payable abroad for a limited window. You'll receive payment for the month you leave, plus 6 additional consecutive months after that. Once you hit the 7th month of continuous absence, your OAS payments pause completely until you reestablish residency back in Canada. And here's something a lot of people don't realize. The government does not automatically resume your payments the moment you land back in Canada based on your travel history. You actually have to contact Service Canada directly and formally report your return in order to get your benefits reinstated. This 6-month rule becomes even more important when we talk about the Guaranteed Income Supplement, or GIS. Regardless of how long you lived in Canada, GIS follows that same 6-month rule far more strictly than OAS does. GIS is designed specifically for lower-income seniors living in Canada, so the moment you cross that 7th month of continuous absence, GIS and any related allowance payments stop completely, and they will not resume until you are back and living in Canada again. If GIS makes up a meaningful portion of your monthly income, this is something you absolutely need to plan around before booking a long stay abroad. Now, let's talk about something that catches higher-income retirees off guard, and that's the OAS recovery tax, often just called the clawback. If you're living abroad and your net world income exceeds a certain threshold, which for the current tax year sits at just over $95,000, you may be required to repay a portion of your OAS regardless of where you live. And here's the detail that trips people up the most. Non-residents receiving OAS are required to file something called the Old Age Security Return of Income every single year to report their global income. If you miss this filing, it's not just a fine or a warning. Your OAS payments can be suspended entirely, even if you're otherwise fully eligible. There's also the question of tax withholding once you officially become a non-resident of Canada. Both CPP and OAS payments to non-residents are generally subject to a withholding tax, although the exact rate can be reduced depending on whether Canada has a tax treaty with the country you're moving to. This is exactly why so many retirees choose to work with a cross-border tax professional before making the move, because the difference between doing this correctly and doing it incorrectly can mean paying significantly more tax than necessary. Here's another piece of good news that most people don't know about. Canada has social security agreements, sometimes called totalization agreements, with more than 60 countries around the world. What this means practically is that if you haven't quite met the residency or contribution thresholds on your own,
Years you spent living or working in one of these partner countries can sometimes be combined with your Canadian years to help you qualify for a full or partial pension. Each country then pays its own proportional share based on your history there. This is particularly useful for that 20-year OAS residency requirement, since time spent in an agreement country may count toward closing that gap. Let's also touch on the practical side of actually receiving your money while abroad. Many retirees choose to keep their Canadian.
Many Canadians still open up their bank account even after moving overseas, and in most cases, this is genuinely a smart move, since it makes it easier to receive CPP and OAS deposits, pay any remaining Canadian bills, and manage financial obligations back home. That said, be aware that some Canadian banks may review or even close accounts belonging to clients who officially establish non-resident status, so it's worth having a conversation with your bank directly before you leave, rather than being surprised by a letter after the fact. So here's the bottom line before you book that one-way ticket. CPP is the easy one. It follows you almost anywhere with no strings attached. OAS depends heavily on whether you've cleared that 20-year residency threshold, and if you haven't, the 6-month clock starts ticking the day you leave. GIS follows that 6-month rule no matter what. High-income earners need to watch for the recovery tax and file that annual return without fail. And finally, take advantage of Canada's international agreements if you've split your working years across more than one country. Moving abroad and retirement can genuinely be one of the best decisions you make, but only if your pension income moves with you the way you expect it to. A little bit of planning before you leave saves you an enormous amount of stress after you've already settled into your new home. If this video helped clear things up, do me a favor and hit subscribe, because we cover exactly this kind of practical financial breakdown every single week here on Frank Canada Today. Drop a comment and let me know where you're thinking of moving to. I read every single one, and I will see you in the next